to fest most of it.
Yeah. More stonewalling, no question about it. All right, Whitney Wild, thank you very much. And joining me now is former President Trump's niece, Mary Trump. She's a psychologist, and she's the host of a new podcast, The Mary Trump Show. Check it out. And she's also the author of the book, The Reckoning, One Nation's Trauma and Finding a Way to Heal. Mary, you've been very busy lately. You've got a podcast, too. I can't wait to check that out. Thanks so much for joining us. What is it about your uncle that makes people put it all on the line? Throw away their careers and reputations, for this, for somebody who, doesn't deserve any of that. But it just seems to happen all over and over again, whether it's stonewalling the January 6th committee, offering up plans to basically overthrow democracy. What is it about Trump that inspires this absurd and self-destructive level of loyalty?
Well, Jim, and first of all, it's great to be here. I think it's complicated, but there are also some quite simple reasons. Donald is incredibly good at attracting people who are weaker than he is, and weak people need external power to give them a sense of identity and purpose. And at this point, I also think of his most ardent sycophants as people who are addicted to cigarette smoking. They just don't think they're the ones who are going to get cancer. They don't think they're the ones who are going to get thrown under the bus because they are going to prove their loyalty in a way nobody ever has before. Obviously, they're deluding themselves. The problem, though, is that Donald might throw them under the bus, but they don't seem to be suffering any other consequences. So there always seems to be more people willing to fill the void.
Well, and he's escaped accountability so many times. I suppose the folks who are willing to sacrifice all of these things think that they'll be in the same boat. But obviously there are some names out there we could mention that certainly don't fit that category. But earlier this week, I had to ask you about this because we saw a video of your uncle speaking at an event where he took aim at his own former Vice President Mike Pence. Let's listen to this.
Mike should have sent those crooked votes back to the legislatures to approve, and you would have had a different result in the election, in my opinion. I think Mike has been very badly hurt by what took place with respect to January 6th. I think he's been mortally wounded, frankly, because I see the reaction he's getting from people.
He says Pence is mortally wounded in his eyes, essentially for doing what was right. I mean, you're a psychologist. What does it say about him, that to this day, unrepentant, no remorse, unapologetic, still, do you think he is delusional and actually believes that he won the election, or he knows that he's got to keep this lie, this big lie going? How do you dissect it?
I think it's oddly a combination of both things. Donald knows he lost, but again, being a loser is one of the worst things you could ever be in my family. So he had to deny that reality immediately. And the best way to do that would be to double down on the lie that it was stolen from him, right? That he's really a winner. But the real danger here is that he's continuing to be allowed to say these things. The only person who should have been, quote unquote, mortally wounded by what's happened over the last few months is Donald's political future. And yet, we find ourselves at this point where American democracy is on the brink because over the course of 5 decades, one repellent, temper tantrum throwing bully has never been held accountable for any of the awful things he's done, including his numerous crimes against America. And now it seems that the racism, the anti-Semitism, the lying are compulsory if you want to run for office as a Republican.
Yeah, and I was just going to play that for you. Let's talk about this because, I just think, he has said so many things over the years and none of it ever comes back to haunt him. But, to me, this one, it boggles the mind. He's being accused of using anti-Semitic. He did use anti-Semitic tropes during this interview with this Israeli journalist. Let's play it. We'll talk about it.
People in this country that are Jewish no longer love Israel. I'll tell you, the evangelical Christians love Israel more than the Jews in this country. It used to be that Israel had absolute power over Congress And today, I think it's the exact opposite. When you look at the New York Times hates Israel, hates them. And they're Jewish people that run the New York Times.
What do you know about him, Mary, in this, I mean, on this subject? Is he anti-Semitic?
Yeah, he comes from an anti-Semitic family. There was no hiding that fact when I was growing up. My grandfather was an anti-Semite, and Donald certainly was, and is clearly. The problem then is that right now some people seem to be surprised by this. I'm not sure why.
Right.
And secondly, again, as I said earlier, he's being given a platform to spread these vile comments he just basically bought into every single despicable anti-Semitic trope out there.
Exactly. I mean, and even goes after the New York Times. And he does this even though his own son-in-law and daughter are Jewish. I just don't understand. Let me ask you one other thing, because this one is really on my mind. A House Oversight Committee released a report detailing how the Trump administration made, quote, deliberate efforts to undermine the nation's coronavirus response for political purposes. I'm sure you saw this. That included reducing the amount of testing being conducted to obscure how rapidly the virus was spreading across the country. I mean, this goes to another, I think, very malignant part of his personality. Do you think that your uncle cost people their lives?
I think that goes without question.
Yeah.
Again, this is something we've known for a long time, but now we have, I guess, documentary proof of it. And the fact that he seems to keep getting away with horrific crimes. I mean, we're not talking about lying about an election, which is also extraordinarily dangerous, of course, to the future of this country. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who died, who should still be alive, but are not, because Donald figured it was a better political strategy for him to preference the economy over the safety and health of the American people. Also, he just did not want to be associated with anything negative. That's how dangerous and psychologically disordered the leader of the Republican Party is today.
Right. And the Post reports, Washington Post reports, that Trump was upset with this passage in Mark Meadows' book that had to do with how Trump looked, so sick when he had COVID. Meadows wrote about how he had red streaks in his eyes, that his hair was a mess. Again, this goes back to he doesn't want to look like a loser or be cast in a light that is, unflattering because it might damage him politically in some way. I mean, it's just so twisted and weird. What does it say that Trump would get upset over that, but not about like a mob of his supporters attacking the Capitol?
Well, it just shows you precisely where his priorities are. And I think it speaks to the fact that we are at this incredibly dangerous crossroads. If our system can't respond swiftly to the threats this very weak and vengeful person continues to pose to the future of American democracy, then I'm afraid we might be irreparably broken. So I really do hope that steps are being taken, real steps, to do something to stop him and hold him accountable finally.
And knowing what you know about him, do you think he's going to run again for these reasons, because he doesn't want to go down as a loser because of all these clear problems that he has?
If he's allowed to, yes, because he needs the power and protection of the Oval Office to keep him out of the massive amounts of trouble he's facing. However, the real question should be, why is he being allowed even to consider it?
Right. And that is the question. And it's a question that you and I can't answer. It's an entire political party that has to answer that question. All right, Mary Trump, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it. And check out Mary's podcast. I can't wait to check that out. That'll be great. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
Great to see you. Coming up, the former police officer who mixed up her gun and taser and shot Dante Wright takes the stand in her own defense.
I'm sorry.